I'm a fighter. Every bone in my body has always told me to fight because I care deeply about Canadians. I care deeply about this country.
I am a fighter, which is why I'm quitting.
Not surprising. The Prime Minister had two options today. He could have called an election or he could quit.
This episode of the Citi-Zen-Ship show is a tribute to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We're going to be looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly, starting back in 2015 and going all the way to 2025. There's a lot of good things this Prime Minister did. There's a lot of bad things that this Prime Minister did. And the question we are trying to answer today is, what is he going to be known for? What is his legacy? So I was actually up till 6 in the morning last night. I went down way too much of a rabbit hole on YouTube.
We banned assault-style weapons. We've frozen the market on handguns. Yeah. And now we're ensuring assault-style weapons remain banned. We're not legalizing marijuana to please recreational users. Canadians got here because Team Canada was driven by the interests of the middle class.
Most of the public services in this area are available in French only.
Si vous permettez, je réponds en français pour que tout le monde puisse entendre.
Peut-être que papa peut ne pas venir me chercher parce que ça fait trop brasser les parents. Tout le monde me regarde,
We were very shocked and very disappointed, and we don't understand how it's possible that he could not have taken the time to be publicly present for such an important day.
Are you right now?
No, I am absolutely not. I am running in the next election.
If I could do things differently, I don't know exactly how I would have, but I certainly would have.
And really, I think he's only the third Prime Minister in Canadian history that can be set up where an internal caucus revolt has basically forced him out of office.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
We're going to start off with my introduction to Trudeau, and that was the Maclean's debate in 2015. Maclean's is a popular magazine here in Canada, and they host a national leaders debate during every single election. The big one that stands out for me is there's this back and forth where they're debating the Clarity Act. And not to get too much into Quebec politics, because that's a big subject. The Clarity Act attempts to clarify how many votes do we need in order to break up the country. Is 50% plus one enough of a mandate to allow Quebec to separate? And Thomas Mulcair was kind of harassing Trudeau, Thomas Mulcair being the leader of the NDP, harassing Trudeau about what his number was. And I think Trudeau's response is one for the history books.
What's his number? What is your number, Mr. Trudeau?
First of all, Mr. Mulcair,
You're not answering.
I don't question your patriotism.
You haven't answered.
The question is,
What's
why
the
is
number,
your policy
Justin?
so reckless? You want a number, Mr.
Yeah,
Mulcair?
give us
I'll
a
give you
number.
a number. 9. My number is 9. 9 Supreme Court justices said one vote is not enough to break up this country. And yet that is Mr. Mulcair's position.
Also, during that debate, they referenced the ad campaign that Stephen Harper had levied against Trudeau. This is a very popular commercial that aired on Canadian cable, and it was, Trudeau, you're just not ready.
Mr. Harper has spent millions of dollars on attack ads trying to convince you that I'm not ready for this job.
Let's talk about Justin.
I see he's included his picture. Let's start with the experience section. Nothing about balancing a budget or making a payroll.
People, being Prime Minister is not an entry-level job.
Nice hair, though.
In order to know if someone is ready for this job, ask them what they want to do with this job. A country that is strong not in spite of our differences, but because of them.
I understand one of the priorities for you was to have a cabinet that was gender balanced. Why was that so important to you?
Because it's 2015.
Justin, I just want to thank you for being such an ally. You're the first Prime Minister to ever walk in a Pride Parade.
Very cool.
Like, that's huge.
Thank you, but it has been an incredible pleasure to be part of fighting the good fight on the right side. That is about respecting people.
Ooh, you're giving me chills.
Yes! When we think about the early years of Trudeau. I think a big thing is his commitment to social causes. He is an ally for the LGBT plus community, and he seemed to really lean into a lot of these left-leaning social issues. One could even argue that he outflanked the NDP on the left. But even back in that early 2015 campaign, it became very obvious to most voters, at least, and I think that's why he inevitably earned his majority, his one and only majority in 2015, but that he was the obvious left-leaning candidate in that election.
You came out famously and you admitted that while you were an MP, you had, smoked pot. Where around here can a fella
You're kidding.
like
that.
Some of the big wins of the Trudeau administration, again, legalizing cannabis would have to be at the top of that list. Marijuana has been part of the Canadian culture for a long time, and it wasn't until 2017, 2018, kind of later on in the Trudeau's first term, that cannabis was legalized for recreational use here in Canada.
Mr. Harper's failed approach on marijuana is actually funding criminal organizations, street gangs, and gun runners.
The promise we made around legalizing marijuana was done for two reasons, and two reasons that I was very, very clear about. One, to better protect our kids from the easy access they have right now to marijuana. And two, to remove the criminal elements that were profiting from marijuana. And we believe that a properly regulated, controlled system will achieve both of those measures. We're not legalizing marijuana to please recreational users.
The point of the legislation was to kind of remove the black market's influence on the sale of the drug and to kind of create safeguards for kids. And I really do believe that's happened here in Canada. As an adult, if you want to purchase cannabis, it's very similar now to purchasing alcohol and cigarettes. You have to go to specific stores and you have to show ID, and they're only available certain hours. Gone are the days of calling up your dealer and waiting outside the school at 2 a.m. for some guy to roll up on a bicycle. Not like I have any experience with that.
In the 5 years that it's been in place, the CCB has helped lift nearly 435,000 kids out of poverty. And for some parents, this benefit means not having to choose between paying bills or putting food on the table.
In terms of economic policy, I think the biggest win for Trudeau would have to be the childcare benefit, kind of overhauling. And again, I don't have kids, so I can't really get into the weeds on this. But before, there was many different programs to support families. And the Liberal argument is that all of these programs kind of conflict each other and they're just complicated. So they really, all these multiple programs were condensed into one program, the child care benefit, and that was given to parents. And apparently the funds that parents receive for their child actually increased over this period. I know this from my friends who do have kids and my family members who are raising young kids at this time, that apparently this was really popular and probably going to be one of his great legacy pieces moving forward. All right, the last thing I want to say on the good column before we move into kind of the more negative stuff is something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Trudeau competed in a charity boxing match against a conservative senator, and it was absolutely hilarious. This was broadcast on Sun News, which is a right-wing news network. You can hear the commentators. They were bashing Trudeau the whole time. Nobody thought this guy was going to win.
Trudeau looking like he does have more stamina, though.
I wouldn't have guessed it. I wouldn't have thunk it. I thought the brass man was hitting them hard and not hard enough to stun the pony.
Well, the resurgence of Trudeau has led to the chance for Trudeau getting louder.
That's one thing. He came in with low expectations. He's exceeding them. Brazeau's holding on to the ropes. Now he's just covering
in the corner, just taking the punches.
Boy.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The ref is stepping in. Boom.
Brazeau's legs giving out on him.
The Tory's going down. He's in the corner. This is game over. The blood. The ref's got to stop it.
Brazeau looking disappointed.
A lot of people losing a lot of money tonight.
Somehow he won. He actually won the fight. They called it off. Trudeau got that stamina, man. And that's what they were saying, that endurance won the day. And it's a funny forecast to how things went, because arguably that stamina is really what was Trudeau's downfall at the end. He just didn't know when to give up, right? Okay. Let's stop messing around. This is the bad stuff. For me personally, at the top of the list of what Trudeau is going to be remembered for is failing on his commitments for electoral reform.
We need to know that when we cast a ballot, it counts. That when we vote, it matters. We are committed to ensuring that the 2015 election will be the last federal election using first past the post.
First past the post is the idea that the person with the most votes wins, right? So if I get 41 votes and you get 42 votes, you've beat me, even though almost 50% of the people didn't want you, right? So a lot of people don't like first past the post, and Trudeau doesn't either. The issue is that he was pushing a system called ranked ballot.
I believe in ranked ballot. I think that if you give people choices to rank 1, 2, 3, parties will try to pitch to be people's second or even third choice.
I could go on at length, but I won't have time now. But just to say, the evidence was overwhelming that proportional representation would serve Canada better.
So there was a whole parliamentary committee and a lot of research done, a lot of public money and a lot of attention put on how do we change our electoral system. And because the committee didn't come to the realization that Trudeau wanted, he just canned it. And we continue with first past the post in this country. There's been no real conversations about changing our electoral system. I did do a whole episode on this. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but that's got to be the first big fail of Trudeau, failing at his promise of delivering electoral reform in this country.
An economy that works for the middle class means a country that works for everyone.
When we're talking about the early Trudeau years, a big quote, and I think this is going to go down as probably one of the biggest Trudeau quotes of all, and that is,
how committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Would it worry you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
I guess it turns out the budget doesn't balance itself after all. But he'll run he says, a modest deficit, a tiny deficit, so small you can hardly see the deficit. That's what he says. A modest deficit, and only for 3 years. Only for, 3 deficits, three modest little deficits.
Do deficits no longer really mean anything to the government? Do they not matter? Why put yourself further into deficit? Why is that so necessary right now? It's necessary when the economy's not doing well, but why is it necessary now?
The economy has always been a hot button issue during elections. And looking back at 2015, one of the very early things that Justin Trudeau used to differentiate himself was this idea that he was okay with running deficits.
Future governments are going to have to carry that debt. The servicing costs on that are going to be very high.
Sorry?
The servicing costs on the debt that you're going to have to carry, that you're adding to now, right?
Interest rates are at historic lows, Glenn.
Okay, but it's still a lot of money.
No.
It's still a lot of money.
No.
And you don't know where. Okay, but how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for those costs in future years? Are you going to increase taxes, or are you going to cut programs?
Okay. The real key is how much interest we're paying on that debt. What are we paying each month? They're spending $28 billion each year on interest on the national debt. That's bigger than many government programs, bigger than the transfers the federal government gives to the provinces.
$61.9 billion. That's the deficit, $21 billion higher than we expected it to be, or than the Liberal government had promised it would be in its budget 2024.
So Trudeau did consecutively run deficits. I think that's going to be one of the big legacy pieces of his administration, is the fact of his financial irresponsibility. I think that's definitely something he's going to be tarred with. And it started way back in that 2015 campaign. 2 words that Trudeau will be associated with is carbon tax.
To create a global standard around putting a price on pollution.
Just 20% of global emissions are subject to carbon pricing. Trudeau wants that tripled to 60% by 2030.
We know that when you put a price on something you don't want, like pollution, well, we're putting a price on pollution, right?
It's a tax, but okay.
The Prime Minister is trying to sugarcoat the reality by saying carbon pricing, but Canadians are not fooled. That's a new tax.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians need economic growth and good jobs at the same time as we protect the environment. What we're also guaranteeing is that this tax, this pricing on carbon will be.
So the Trudeau administration, in its attempts to try to be stewards of the environment, put a price on carbon. They always called it a price on carbon. They refused to call it a carbon tax, even though that's what colloquially it's known as. And let's just call a spade a spade.
It's a tax, but okay.
The carbon tax, again, if you want to learn more about the carbon tax, you can go to Pierre Poilievre's YouTube channel and he will tell you all about it. But I'm pretty sure most Canadians were familiar. That is a policy Trudeau championed and probably one of the things that created his demise. I think a lot of people are calling this upcoming election in 2025, the Conservatives at least, are calling it the carbon tax election. So there's many people who are going to be going over to that Conservative camp because they really dislike this policy.
I went to some very good schools as a child. And throughout this experience, I can only feel guilty, but at least very aware of the contrast between my schooling and the experiences some others went through, the survivors went through, the families of the survivors went through, and those who were not survivors.
For those whose families and lives have been haunted by the grim legacy of residential schools.
People came out of the schools significantly and seriously traumatized. So this is a problem that is ongoing every single day. We certainly need to have the political support.
I am honored to be Canada's Governor General and to be part of acknowledging this very first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It
was almost earth-shattering in the fact that it was reopening those traumatic wounds that they have felt so long ago.
This is a big one. We're going to talk about Trudeau's Tofino trip. Justin Trudeau was one of those prime ministers who really tried to push forward this idea of reconciliation with Indigenous people. The Trudeau administration was the first administration to create this new holiday. I don't like calling it a holiday. It's more of a day of remembrance. But Truth and Reconciliation Day was supposed to be a day where we honor, there's no trust between the government and Indigenous communities. And Trudeau was really trying to reestablish that trust through the reconciliation process.
Leaders of the First Nation in Kamloops, BC, had sent 2 invitations to Trudeau to join them at their ceremony Thursday.
I am truly saddened that he was not able to join us today.
There was a ceremony in Kamloops. This is the important part. There was a ceremony in Kamloops that was taking place on the first Truth and Reconciliation Day. The Prime Minister had an invitation to attend this ceremony. So instead of participating in this ceremony in Kamloops, Trudeau flew over. He actually left Ottawa, flew west, and we can put the plane on because I found the clip here.
Trudeau's plane, a Royal Canadian Air Force Challenger, left the national capital at 7 a.m. Ottawa time. And by 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, he was within a couple of hundred kilometers of Kamloops, where the ceremonies would begin at 9 a.m. But he flew right over, landing at Tofino shortly after 10 a.m. local time.
Flew right over Kamloops, landed in Tofino, and decided to have a little surfing day with his family. Now, funny enough, he was actually tracked down by some reporters, and there was an infamous interview done on the beach. I'm going to run a clip of that now.
I asked you, though, sir, I'll just ask you super quickly. Your minister said that going on vacation. No, don't put your hands on me. Don't put your hands on me. Then please. Your minister said that going on vacation on road trips actually causes the world to be set on fire.
Do you realize that one of the challenges we have right now is good people are looking at
the costs of being in politics, being in public life, costs on family, costs on all sorts of different levels, and wondering whether or not it's worth it.
Are you calling yourself a good person here?
No.
The long and short of it is that Trudeau felt like he needed a holiday, right? And I get it. We all need breaks and all this stuff. You know, we're all human after all. But the idea of creating a time and space to honor Aboriginal communities and then treating it as a vacation like that whole scenario just left a very bad taste in not only Aboriginal communities, like they didn't like it, but even white people were like, you know, this is absolutely ridiculous. You know, the rest of us, most private sector people still had to work. I have to work on those days. It's just a government holiday. But this is why I'm kind of rambling here. I don't like to call Truth and Reconciliation Day a holiday. I really think it's a place of remembrance, and it's a time to connect with communities and go to these kind of ceremonies. And this whole idea that Trudeau blew off the ceremony and decided to take a vacation and then was offended, like physically offended, visually offended by the fact that this reporter was asking him questions on his holiday, that's got to be one of the biggest blunders, top blunders of the Trudeau administration.
A lot of people were so helpless and so desperate, they ended up participating in a protest in Ottawa.
Blaring horns, impassable streets, all the work of a new movement calling itself Freedom Convoy. Truck drivers demanding an end to COVID-19 vaccine mandates have disrupted major Canadian cities and clogged key U.S.-Canada border crossings.
By invoking this Emergencies Act, which has never been used before in the law's current form, it gives the federal government sweeping powers, including providing local police with federal law enforcement resources. On top of that, you can see the truckers are still here. It also gives the Canadian banks the ability to freeze bank accounts without a warrant of anyone participating in this road blockade.
It's important to underline that close to 90% of truckers in this country are vaccinated.
But the straw that really broke the camel's back was COVID. COVID was a hard time for all of us, not an easy time for governments across the world. And, you know, you can cut them a little bit of slack. But I think when we talk about COVID and the Trudeau administration, nothing comes to mind more than the trucker convoy.
We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other.
And Trudeau's unwillingness to even meet with the protesters, him calling them all sorts of names. We can run the clip here in a moment here. But I think that is probably, again, one of these big moments where a lot of Canadians started to wake up and go, who does this guy think he is?
What does Justin Trudeau mean when he says the word hate speech? He means speech he hates.
Canadians know how important news is, and access to quality local journalism particularly is essential for not just the well-being of their communities, for the well-being of our democracy. We will continue to make sure that these incredibly profitable corporations contribute to strengthening our democracy, not weakening it.
And last week, Facebook's parent company Meta said it was preparing to block news for some Canadians on Facebook and Instagram. Bill C-18, known as the Online News Act, would require tech giants to pay publishers for linking to or otherwise repurposing their content online.
I got to bring this up because I am a YouTuber, and the Trudeau administration and the Liberals as a government have really created some really weird laws around the internet. They started this whole fight with Google and Meta, and it's still going on today. Canadians can't access news sites through Facebook and Instagram, even to this day. And it's because, and again, it's a topic that I do want to go into more in depth in a future video, but the very core of it is I really see this as smartphone technology is the way that people get information. Very rarely do we sit down and stay tuned for after these messages like we did back in the old days, right? So because of this exchange of power, these old cable companies aren't getting the money that they used to get. So the Trudeau administration is now going after Google and Meta and other tech companies and asking them, well, not asking them, forcing them to have a revenue sharing back to these old cable companies with the argument that they're losing out on market share. Now, I don't want to stand up for Zuckerberg and Google because, like, who likes big tech, right? But at the end of the day, it's just, to me, it's like you're fighting against the winds of change.
Oh, shoot, my papers. Oh, my papiers. It's okay. I'll deliver this speech off the dome.
This resignation is still very fresh. It literally just happened 24 hours ago. We're really going to have to see how things unfold. It'll be really interesting to see the leadership race that the Liberals try and put together here. But I think the sentiment that most Canadians have waking up to this news is, why did this take so long? You know, that the Trudeau really dragged his feet on this, and that this really leaves Canadians in a vulnerable place.
This announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected, President and Vice President of the United States, each for a term beginning on the 20th day of January, 2025.
We have President Donald Trump entering the Oval Office on January 20th. Now, Trudeau is still the de facto prime minister. He still holds all the powers and responsibilities of a prime minister until he officially steps down. But this kind of puts him in that lame duck president, to use an American term, kind of in this weird limbo where he is and he isn't, right? So when we're talking about legacy, there's a lot of good stuff that Trudeau has done in his career. There's a lot of bad stuff. And only time is going to tell how these things actually come out in the wash, so to speak. To close out, I do want to salute our Prime Minister.
We salute the rank, not the man.
We salute the rank, not the man. And the idea behind that sentiment is that when you hold a position of Prime Minister, that means something and it carries a certain amount of weight with it. And that even though we might not like Justin, I just wanted to take the time and salute Prime Minister Trudeau. With that, my name is Clinton. This has been the Citi-Zen-Ship Show. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on this road with us. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video with a friend. Stay informed. Stay zen. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.
And now, my dear, sashay away.
I knew that was coming. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Hate to see you leave. Love to watch you walk away.